Arceus Duraludon strikes again at yet another international championships. Ian Robb was able to pilot it to a second place finish, this time with the partnership of Umbreon VMAX, trying to give you a better time into not only the Mew VMAX matchup with that helpful Dark type coverage, but also giving you a decent time into Gardevoir players, which of course are on the rise with the new introductions from Paldea Evolved. The Umbreon offers up a Mean Look option, where you can try and use this in combination with Double Turbo Energy to reduce your damage output, and Painful Spoons from Radiant Alakazam to infinitely trap certain Pokemon in a Gardevoir player's deck. So if the opponent isn't playing Penny or Switch, they can simply lose on the spot to Mean Look already in the deck. But the upside of Umbreon is that it's just a very powerful card in its own right. The Max Darkness deals that 160, so with only basic energy attached, you are able to knock out Mew VMAX cleanly and Gardevoir EX cleanly, which is fantastic. And on top of that, you have the Dark Signal option, which when you put this Pokemon into play, you can choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and put them into the active position, giving this deck a different dimension from what it had in the past. Previously, it really just relied on heavy poker gear and boss's orders to make sure they're taking out important threats at the right time. Now we have it in Pokemon form, which really helps us out, especially when we are getting hand disrupted. We still end up having a huge amount of outs to close the game. You have the Umbreons, the Lumineon, the Ultra Balls, you have the bosses themselves, Adventurous Discovery, and even just your draw supporters like Research and even Iono. These become like okay outs because then you can still dig for game because Umbreon VMAX can still close for you, which is a fantastic option in the deck. This isn't just used so that you can take knockouts with Duraludon on like 2 prizes or just with Umbreon itself to deal with the Dark Weak stuff. You can always just use this in combination with Lost City, even as early as turn 2, so that you are nothering through some real key Pokemon from the opponent's side of the field. That's part of the reason why the Lost City is such a crucial card in the deck, so that we can be taking out Ralts and Curliers for good, so they can't just be rodded back and really starts depleting the opponent's board. You can do the same thing in a number of matchups. Even things like Lost City against Lost Zone decks can be very handy, where they only have 1 or 2 crucial attackers that can hit high damage output thresholds. You can get rid of them for good as well, with no recycle option. So that's really the cornerstone here. The Umbreon seems like a really strong addition, with its type coverage and just being, Instant Gust is a huge option. The Duraludon still is a very strong card in general. That Skyscraper is still relevant into a number of Arceus players, and of course some Lugia players. It, again, turns the game into a game of cat and mouse with Urshifu and seeing if you can deal with it in time or not, because you will immediately win the game if you can get rid of their answer Pokemon, essentially. And the 220 threshold on Pulverization that also gets through all effects is just massive. It allows you to target down evolving V Pokemon for instant knockouts, which is fantastic. And actually, we can get pretty close to knocking things out with the belt. We get to 250, and with the help of Radiant Alakazam, with what is predominantly a 2-hit KO deck, sometimes we can just Painful Spoon things in and out of range with this ability over a couple turns to actually like really speed up the win conditions of this archetype, which is really cool. The Alakazam also can come in handy against the Gardevoir matchup, because again, the Guardies are going to be damaging themselves quite heavily, and you can just take a Painful Spoon off of it or onto it to just instantly knock it out over the course of the game, and that's just a free prize card immediately for you, which is fantastic. Arc also gets a bit of help against Mew players, where previously you were quite scared of their early pressure. Now you have Spiritomb at your disposal to just really slow down their draw engine. It's very difficult for them to find a Sparkle combination to actually like get a pressure knockout before you're able to evolve up your V Pokemon, when they have to also consider that Spiritomb is a thing. Maybe they even go for an Ice Cube play rather than going for a Meloetta play if their hand is excellent, because they have to deal with Spiritomb at some point in the game. So this is really going to be helpful. It's also a bit of disruption against a handful of other things, stops opponents at times using Lumineon to get into the game. That can be massive against Chem PAL players, because they really are reliant on those early Iridas to get Baxcalibur rolling. It's very good against denying Lumineon against Lugia players as well. There's a number of reasons why the Spiritomb can come in clutch and just be an extra headache for opponents. And Ian really kept things quite simple here. Really like the high support accounts across the board. The Adventurous Discovery being pseudo boss's orders as well at times with the Umbreon is exceptional, and just allows you to evolve up into really chunky hit point Pokemon all in one go, essentially, which is exceptional. And everything else is just very streamlined and straightforward. Maybe a small debate to be had versus 4th Dark and 3rd Fighting. Like, you could just go 3 and 3 here. Just a minor debate there to be had, seeing that there's only one darkness cost in Umbreon's attack, including as well as there being one fighting cost in Duraludon's attack. So by only playing 2 of this one and 4 of this one, it may be a little bit more difficult for you to attack with 2 different Duraludon VMAXs, but that doesn't come up all that often anyway, so it feels pretty okay the way Ian's gone about things, knowing that Umbreon, you want to have that option to mean look, like throughout the mid and late game as well, so keeping a Dark Energy around in the deck gives you that sort of late game pivot panic option to either just like buy turns or be your late game win condition because the opponent has used their switch or used their penny pad in like Guardy lists and stuff. So just things to bear in mind there. Nothing too exceptional from the deck list. It's just trying to be really meaty, really difficult deck to get over, and you lean into Starbirth to sort of stitch together the whole deck. So let me know your thoughts down below and enjoy the games. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. So we get into our first game. Looks like our opponent gets to go first. We do start Lumineon, which isn't ideal, but at least we have Nest Ball and DTE. We see a Raikou V, so it's either going to be Miraidon or more likely the Turbo Lost Zone box. And the VIP pass means it's probably going to be Turbo Lost box that we're contending with here. Definitely an intriguing matchup. Thanks to the choice belts in the list, we can try and get through Dragonite in one hit, but it's really how they can try and utilize that card before we Lost City out of play to see where their sort of pressure comes from. Most of all, the opponent gets the concealed cards into flower selecting turn 1, not too shabby. Get rid of a vacuum for second VIP, so they are getting nicely set up here. They develop Manaphy, which is a bit weird. I guess they just don't have much of the Bull Search available. Maybe they're thinking because we start Lumineon that we're playing Chien Pao, perhaps? We pick up the Iono, which makes our hand actually much better because now we can try and find switch outs and actually get a Trinity charge in here, which is definitely helpful. Also means I can pitch a few more cards of this hand and get a backup Arceus to play around the Dragonite plus Rope play, because they still have their Forest Hill Stone available. And we actually do hit the switch, which is pretty huge here, just to get that early acceleration in, so we're not locked into possibly like a Raihan or something like that next turn. So that's actually really, really handy. I'm going to throw a couple Dark and a Metal down, because Duraludon is obviously a good attacker in this matchup. The size of it is obviously huge. So the opponent starts off with the Forest Seal Stone here, and straight into Colress. To begin their quest, getting towards Mirage Gate, no doubt, will be their priority here. See a failed Nest Ball into a Vacuum, into Flower Selecting. I believe this gets them to 7 with this selecting. See concealed cards. See a Rope. I don't want to give them, again, still have to respect an option for Dragonite here. So just going to give them the Lumineon. I can always attach Retreat out if they don't knock this out for any reason. More failed Nest Balls just because I don't want to draw them later on. They just then bench Cram, which means they don't have a valid Gates option here. So they're just going to hit us with the Spit Innocently. Not too bad for us, honestly. We can just get on out of here, City and research. We do find Arc V Star, which is always nice. Let's get into that guy. Don't necessarily have to use Starbirth here. The only thing that I would possibly get is like a Duraludon V or something like that. But honestly, don't think I really have to. Yeah, I'm happy at just taking the knockout here and sort of being more responsive to the opponent, see how their turn plays out next turn. I already have Iono in hand for next turn as well, so it feels like I have pretty much everything I need. The only thing I would go for there is like Duraludon V and then maybe VMAX or something. But I can find those things next turn anyway. Quite happily. See a Roxanne going to their Lost Zone, happy with that. Because we don't play an engine at all, so sometimes if you just go down to the dying stages of a game and you get hand disrupted, then things can be a little dicey. Another Rope comes in, so I will just feed the fish now. So the opponent is able to Lost Mine, taking out the Lumineon, sending Arc V Star well, actually both arcs into 250 range, which is, of course, for that Dragonite as well. So doing everything they can to be a nuisance and try and get through our arcs quite easily. I'm going to commit the Choice Belts, which is pretty okay. I also didn't Starbirth once again, just still keeping that option open for later, knowing that they probably do want to bounce this path at some point. And we just go for the Nova here. I think the risky side of this is that if the opponent does just off the 4-card hand have an explosive Dragonite turn, I then lose my only way of getting through the Dragonite in one hit because I've committed the Belt now. So that's the only minor concern. Possibly should have just Starbirthed first there, so I could just pop the Belt on a Duraludon. That was maybe a little safer of a play, because I could just get blown up here and then just be in a really bad spot. So I think that's one of the only things looking back at that I think was probably a little bit weird. Keeping the Starbirth open for this long is kind of unusual. As it happens, the opponent just artisans out a Sableye, which is a much better outcome for us. Looks like they're having to use the gates to move the Confer here. Actually, no, they're just going to keep it banked on the bench, and they'll just continue to Lost Mine here. And they're going to continue to spread damage that little bit. It passes over to us. So the opponent has a 5-card hand. Not necessarily the best option to just go for the... Well, Boss's Orders is pretty interesting here, because it's a bit of a worry for the opponent to go for a Dragonite. Also just evolving... Yeah, I kind of like just more hand disruption, evolving, and maybe even getting this arc out the way is the best thing I can do here. Protect the Belt on the bench is really what I'm thinking of. Because the Belt is still massive for us getting through a Dragonite. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think the Rope is actually probably our best option. Slamming the Metal down is fine. I'm just going to go after the Confade with energy, not give them any easy pivots, still try and make it hard for that Dragonite to get into the mix. And we're going to shove an extra basic onto the Arc via the active, as well as powering up our Durrr on the bench. Definitely a questionable turn there, and I think it was really just fixing my mistake of attaching the Belt earlier on. The Belt is honestly such a big card, and with the burst potential of a Dragonite, I possibly wasn't respecting it enough for a turn, and then this Starbirth got weird because we were trying to fix that issue, basically. But now I'm pretty well prepared for any Dragonite to come into play. It's hard for them to do everything, plus have Boss on top of that. We should probably go into the Duraludon here. I feel like it's a tough call, but again, just having that 230 threshold is just the crucial point that's keeping us in this game, I think. So that we're not slowed down by a Dragonite taking 2 swings. Speaking of which, here is Dragonite. We are going to see the turn attach plus gates play. So it's finally in the mix. And it is going to be going through a Durrr, but I can insta-KO with an Arc, and then they'll have 2 prize cards remaining, with especially with this Lost Zone sticking in play, and an Iono coming back at them. No real easy way to close here. They've even damaged the Raikou on the bench. Not that that even matters now anyway. So yeah, we can just swing. They're a 2-card hand, and Dragonite is dealt with, so they have no more higher damage output in the deck. So nice win there against Lost Box, even though I made maybe a questionable play at one point. We were still able to preserve the Belt for long enough. Looks like we get to start with a Umbreon here, and we are getting to go first. So seeing Ball Search plus Energy Attachment is everything you want in a hand. We will grab our Arc V, of course. Have a quick look through the energy cards. And we will send things down to our opponents. We're sat on a monster hand, really. We have the option to Gust next turn, plus we have Starbirth. We could be hand disrupting at that stage. We could be doing all sorts. And we see now that it's a Gardevoir deck, and they are level balling for Ralts. And not much else. And this is one of the things that Arc is very good at punishing. Gardevoir players, especially ones that have not great starts. We can instantly go Rope Attach City, and they're going to be in a whole heap of trouble now. They didn't have a supporter last turn. I don't even play the research here. I just go straight for thinning out cards from the deck. We're actually going to change our mind and put some Dark Energies on the Umbreon here. but the opponent's just straight away in trouble because we insta-Lost City'd them, and that's kind of a big win condition against the opponent. If they don't have a good start, they just lose on the spot, basically, and that's one of the great pressures of Lost City. So, not really a great game, but a good showcase of how we can put pressure on certainly Gardevoir players, and that the Lost City is a win condition in itself in this deck. Just by going hunting with your Umbreons, your bosses, your ropes, as you just saw. Definitely a big deal. Couple mulls, but we do end up with an arc start, which is always nice. And looks like it's another lost matchup. We're just going to have the textbook attached pass of an arc deck. A little bit scary, because if the opponent does get to 7, we could be in trouble from the likes of a Dragonite. But they started Sableye. Looks like their mulligan card was a Confe. And we saw from the Hisuian it's actually a Giratina list. Tina is actually quite scary, because they have, of course, that V-Star power that can get through even the highest amount of hit points with ease. But the opponent was supportless again, so they're just going to Abyss Seek from the offset here and get to 2. We have a couple really interesting lines here. I could just go for the easy adventurers and get V-Star Nova in and hit for 160 and just get something powered up. But with a 9-card hand and the opponent with only 2 cards in the Lost Zone, I actually really like the slightly greedy line of just go for the Judge here, hope that our 7-outs is enough to find V-Star, and even if it's not, I could just Trinity Charge to the bench anyway, hoping that the Duraludon could be enough to get through a Tina V, and just really hope that the early Judge is really detrimental to a Giratina player. I feel like it really can be at times, and now we're just getting our Starbirth in, knowing that the Tina list can be playing paths, and we want to give ourselves decent options for the following turn. I think having Iono, Boss, and Switch, and Ultra Ball in hand are all really good things for us here, so we have a ton of flexibility, we get that hit in, and we got to get the early Judge in, which is so good against a Tina, especially because there's a Tina in the active position, so they don't get easy selects to get them out of this funky hand. They do have access to Radiant Greninja. And what else do they have? Can they even move this Giratina, or is it just another Abyss Seek? Okay, we see the switch cards. This select will get them to only 3 in the Lost Zone so far. They really need to start finding Chorus. Just see an Escape Rope. I'm happy enough going to Lumineon here. Want to keep my option open to Umbreon VMAX them. And I don't want Durrr taking a chunk. We actually see a boss's orders now to get the extra retreat cost Umbreon into the active position just for the Panic Abyss seeking. And you can see that this early Judge has been really painful for them. We can switch in to Arc now, and we get to keep Boss and Iono still in hand. So we're representing like a weak hand, right? All I had was Switch Attack. But I take the 2 prize cards and I'm still sitting on this monster hand. Still with all the options, like, for the remainder of the game. We've got another attacker lined up. We've thinned the deck of energies. We're pretty ahead on tempo. And if the opponent puts down a Tina, they probably need to put down 2 at the same time, because I'm holding Boss with Duraludon as a play. And with us already being 2 prizes up and with so much meat on the board, they can't really just rely on Sableyes and Crams. The game would get away from them, so they need to get some multi-prizes back onto the board here whilst fueling this zone. That's what they're doing. They're getting a Confe out, going for another select. They're going to get rid of Pokegear. I'm almost certain they will have gates online at this point. They've used a few things, especially with this Chorus, but it's not really the issue. The issue is they need to get double Tina developed here. And they have to hope that like one Tina can see them through quite a few prize cards. As it happens, we see a Tina V come down. They've already turn attached, so they can't do much else here, I don't think. They can thin the deck with gates, I suppose, but it's a bigger risk if the Tina does go down. I suppose they're telling themselves that if the Tina goes down, they concede immediately. They have paths, so they're at least stopping the Umbreon but we've been holding on to this boss for a couple turns, and we will instantly take out the Tina, and that's pretty much the game from there, right? They're not going to win. So, yeah, a nice win against the Tina. Early Judge was risky, but we had the fallback of Trinity Charge. It just so happened that we hit the high roll, which is always nice. Looks off against a Mew next. And once again, our hand is really good. We have Ball Search, we have Energy. That's always nice. We have a Research as we are going second. The opponent has a really good start as well. They have Nest plus VIP to get some of the things out. We see the Meloetta as well. Cleansing Gloves just going on to a Genesect to draw a couple cards. And one of the beauties of this list is that we do have Spiritomb that we can try and jam early against our opponent, and that's definitely going to be a priority of ours. I see a Cramtails and then Genesect for a couple more. Do see an Ultra Ball. Getting rid of a couple supporter cards, actually. Judge and Iono, that's great to see. Really good for us, actually. Means that it's even more likely that a Spiritomb can stick them here. They do get a pretty nice Ultra Ball, though. 2 VIPs hitting the discard pile. And a pass over to us. So they have a 4-card hand, and we know that one of them is Mew. So there's debate of whether because I have double turbo, we're Trinity charging, right? But it's whether we go for the early Tomb or the early Umbreon. I do go for the Research here rather than going Fish for Adventurous Discovery, because that was another line, but giving them those easy prize cards is always a worry. And turns out we do still find Ball Search, and I get a backup Arceus, so this is the absolute dream, where we're hoping that on that random 3-card hand that they don't at least have Sparkle, and then from there we could be good. And looks like they just have a Path. And with them stuck on nothing and us with just Shuffle Draw, we don't want to shuffle their deck, so we're just going to thin the deck and power up our next Arceus, take a patient approach, and know that next turn I could try and dig for V-Star possibly, and like retreat into Arc V-Star and try and get the one-hit KO. We're actually top deck V-Star, so if we can take the knockout. But yeah, we definitely never want to hand disrupt a Mew player when they are just passing into you. We just get free turns. There's a Path and Tomb developed now, so there's a lot that they have to get around if they want to start drawing cards. We know they have VMAX in hand, but they don't have energy by the looks of things, so we can just continue to just strike through them, essentially. The only thing I would have really wanted there was like an Umbreon VMAX, but I think we're pretty good here. Even just taking out the Meloetta, taking out that high damage output option for them later in the game is huge for us here. But it looks like the combination of Tomb and their own Path basically insta-wins us this game. And the Arc deck isn't really known for making games interesting. It's really just trying to be the only one playing the game through one tech or another. We see a Cramtails, and I think that might spell the end of the game, yeah. Let's get one more in. Apologies for having some boring concessions from opponents, but this deck doesn't try and make the game interesting. It literally just tries to set up the biggest things possible and just sort of be a threat and just be a presence, and that's really the whole deck in a nutshell. Have a pretty solid start once again. Ball Search Energy, Supporter. See a Drapion start for opponent. That's not great. Definitely against us. I mean, we do play single strike Pokemon, so they can get the Wild Style reduction, but not too concerned about it. See a Flying Peak. So it's like a Catron list, I suppose, but Drapion wasn't in Catron, so it's like a different Arc amalgamation. We see that Avery and the Trekking Shoes, they can't get into the active for Trinity Charge, which is really good for us. A few different options here. If I Lost City, it means I can't Path them early, and that might be our best play. And the Iono is very kind. We hit Double Turbo and Arc. So now we can go definitely Pathing the opponent and switch. Yeah, that has to be the line here, right? They have a 2 retreat cost Pokemon in the active position, and just it's so difficult for them without Starbirth to be able to get their V-Star attached bench and switch out. It's just too many specific cards, when often there's only 2 switch outs in the Arc decks, the Switch and the Rope. We actually see a Chorus's Experiment, so their support line is kind of funky, right? Oh wow, they're playing Klefkis as well. There's a lot going on in their list. They're out here experimenting for sure. See the Flying Peak come in. Just a pass back to us, so we do get the free Drapion KO. And now I can get to the work on Duraludon, which is definitely a solid card in Arc Mirror matches, because that 220 threshold is just so high, gets through anything that they might want to evolve into. We take the 2 first prize cards. The opponent only has 3 cards in hand. They don't have Starbirth online, although they do at least have an Arc V-Star on the bench now. And they actually judge us, which is pretty solid here. We get straight back into Adventurous Discovery, though, which is looking like a pretty good option here, honestly. The Peak is getting set up. And we can just start thinning the deck at this stage. Looks like we do have both VMAX in the deck for the Duraludon, so that's going to be thinned out the deck. Because I can't bounce Path at any point anyway, I feel like just getting the Durrr and the Arc is okay here. And we'll just hit them. Keep loading up these Umbreons, I suppose. Maybe an argument's putting 1 energy on Duraludon there just to give ourselves an easier retreat option later, because VMAXs have 3 retreats, but only a minor thing, really. The opponent is going to respond on our Arc, but we have another knockout lined up. So if we go Boss, it means they have to go into Flying Peak next turn. And that's like quite low damage output, right? It's just the 160. So they can't really chain 160s into the Durrr. We're basically forcing them to, yeah, boss around us or have Belt in hand. So the fact they go for a boss here, it's going to work out nicely because it's very unlikely that we find a switch out here. But kind of in the long game of what they can attack with, they're really limited. Like, if I just find a switch out here, I win on the spot, right? We don't, so I'll just attach a double turbo to the active. I think we actually prized our last switch out, so I couldn't have just drawn into it. We've prized our rope, I believe, just looking at through the deck. But this was a way that they could sort of like get ahead. They have to attack with a Peak here, right? Because they've already hit for 180. But they also need to Path, otherwise I can fish for boss. Yep. And they do hit the Iono. So it looks like they're clawing a little bit close here with the Panic Gust play. I mean, it was lucky that we hit boss off prizes. If we don't hit boss, they need to find off their 2 or their 3 prizes, like a basic energy plus a boss's orders to close the game themselves on one of our 200 hit point Umbreons. So it wasn't too far away from them. Possibly my Gust was a little bit greedy, rather than just going for take out the active prizes. But then, of course, they could evolve out of my easy prizes. So it was a close one. And we were possibly a little bit fortunate to get the win there. Probably shouldn't have evolved into the other Durrr VMAX. That just gave them a window of a free attack turn. But yeah, that's Arc Durrr Umbreon. It kind of just does the thing. If you get your turn 1 energy drop, like we did in a lot of these games, and if you get your turn 2 V-Star, you're a really good deck. So you're really condensing your luck into those opening turns of the game. Then as soon as you get to turn 2 unscathed, you're really putting the pressure on a lot of things. Let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for another video. Cheers.